Honest J. Nowak. Coming at you live. Alright. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome to the fourth part out of 5 that I'll be doing to finish off this little marathon for today. And more importantly, welcome to the second to last part that I got for Honest J. Nowak Graphix. And what could be more important than that? Then, well, guess what? We're going to be going along to yet another title relating to Resident Evil. Because let's go ahead and talk about Resident Evil Village. Whoop. There we go. This is in fact a straight up sequel that is set a few years after the events of Resident Evil 7, otherwise known as Resident Evil Biohazard. And I will say that being the latest that we got from the Resident Evil series, and also being the first ever PlayStation 5 entry for Resident Evil, I will say this one, being a 2021 title and all, probably doesn't always have what it takes. So I really unfortunately have to say right here that 2021, while it is in fact the worst that we've ever possibly seen as humans, we've certainly seen a lot, but of all years that we've possibly ever seen, this one just tops everything else, like so bad. But I mean, I found some ways to try and enjoy it. And there were a variety of different 2021 PlayStation 4/PlayStation 5 releases that I've been able to get my hands on pretty much. And that of course not only includes this, but I was also able to play Monster Jam Steel Titans 2, Outriders, and some others pretty much. And I can't necessarily say that they're all decent for the record. But Resident Evil Village, I'm more or less willing to not take for granted by any means. Because when discussing a lot of different Resident Evil titles, I've mentioned before that Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is a nice way to give us a whole new perspective on the franchise itself. A great way to give us an outstanding, fresh, clean slate to help us get ourselves a new start to continue the franchise without having to do a whole lot. It was a nice way to even reboot the series. And with this, Village does act as the number 8 in the series, the 8th official title that we got, while also being its own thing pretty much. It is in fact a straight up sequel to Resident Evil 7. It was basically released in May 2021 and is set the year before then. So I tell you, I mean, there's a lot of incredible things that we're seeing about how there are certain pieces of media taking place in the year 2020. And I'm actually more than happy to basically do my part on the whole thing. Because being a year that has been hated for all the wrong reasons, I mean, compared to what we're facing right now, 2020 really is a year that we'd rather be stuck living in forever. Because at least there, everything began perfectly fine. For crying out loud, man. What is wrong with y'all? Well, anyways, I'm actually more than relieved to say that Resident Evil Village is actually a decent title. Not just being survival horror, not just being action adventure, not just being for a shooter game, not just being for a crafting sort of game out there, but also being that what PlayStation 4 games pretty much do best, an open world game. But unfortunately, like some games out there, there are some ways that you'd have to pretty much earn your way to eventually earning the open world mechanic. Because, well, basically speaking, you don't necessarily start off as an open world. The opening cutscene basically gives us both Ethan and Mia Winters, along with a now infant child, whom had only been born a little while ago. And there are some things that we're pretty much told here and there about a lot of things about the child, whom is called Emily. But unfortunately, a team of soldiers led by the legendary Resident Evil's own boulder puncher, Chris Redfield, enters the home, kills off Mia, abducts Emily, and knocks Ethan unconscious. But then it gets to a point where Their van ends up toppling around the road. Ethan regains consciousness, picks up a cell phone, tries to find out what's going on, and then has to explore the vast empty darkness of the snowy roads, before eventually coming along to some sort of abandoned village, which just so happens to allow for some rather terrifying creatures of all sorts of things. But it turns out there's a reason for all this. In the same way that eventually when we find out what happens in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, that there's a problem going on with the Baker household down in the south. But in comparison, I will at least point out that Village does give us something different to work with. A whole lot of differences between this and 7 can immediately be identified, especially within a lot of the internet memes that have taken place. If you're familiar with Resident Evil Village's huge meme repertoire, then guess what? You're basically going to encounter that by playing the actual game itself. The all-time famous antagonist in the game, Lady Dimitrescu, does in fact become a rather prominent villain in this game. But believe it or not, Dimitrescu is not the main villain in this game. Not at all. No. There actually are a few other unique bosses that you basically get to fight off against, because at some point in the game, Ethan gets captured and has to pretty much go and find these other different bosses. And these bosses do contain several different things out there that are necessary in order to basically give the way to eventually finding Emily in one piece. But with the many things that Ethan has to do, there is also another unique mechanic that takes place. A shop. A shop for items, for weapons, for upgrades, for other related stuff, etc., etc. The shop vendor, who is called Dude, is a rather obese person living inside the village who offers to help Ethan out with basically anything that's possible. The in-game currency can in fact be earned from doing a variety of different things, including killing some enemies, solving different puzzles, and also allowing for some different things to take place. You can also find this exact currency around in certain areas that you can unlock yourself by simply performing the kind of puzzle aspect that has in fact become a rather big trademark trope of Resident Evil's titles itself. I'd say compared to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, Village really is quite an amazing rival when it comes to utilization of both being able to use different items to open new paths, be able to progress through the story itself, and encounter different bosses and enemies to face off against, the rather upheaving difficulty that eventually takes place. But like all playthroughs that I've made on GWK content of all sorts, I simply stick to the easiest known difficulty possible, just to have a nice, clean, easy playthrough by all means, with the minimal death toll taking place, as minimal as possible. But I will say though that by the time I got to the end of the game, the final battle that takes place where Ethan basically has to kill off the final boss and rescue Emily, it basically ends off with a rather nasty explosion. It's basically a bit of a different direction than what the majority of Resident Evil games have pretty much given us. But it is, simply put, the same old tradition that has been going on since day one in 1996, where there's a ginormous explosion and a bit of a helicopter ride at the end to give us an ending of a lifetime. So, it almost seems repetitive. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Resident Evil Village basically being a reboot series that is continuing the Resident Evil franchise entirely, with the main series itself not necessarily getting along so well. It basically does, in fact, give us a whole different perspective on the whole entire series as it is. And it's also important to note that there is an end credit scene at the end of this game, where Emily is all grown up and recruited to help with the American government, in the same way that a variety of other well-known main characters like Chris Redfield, Leon Kennedy, and some others pretty much have also pretty much taken place as well. So Resident Evil Village, being survival horror, being open world in a way, if you can get along far enough, being craftsmanship, being a shop sort of thing out there, and being a huge venue for a variety of different antagonists that have become high-grade meme material online. I'd say it's probably decent. It's probably one of only a handful of exemptions that I would personally guarantee that there might as well just be some way that 2021 could in fact be fathomable. But above all that, I'm not at all willing to say that any of these games actually are good. Maybe other people might digress, but the truth is, the year 2021 has given a lot of negativity, way too much than any other year ever known. And at the time, I felt like 2017 was probably the worst year I might have ever lived in. But 2020, it's something that people are going to continue to lie about on a daily basis. But there is so much evidence about it being a good year in comparison to this. Way too much. Way too much evidence. So it's just ridiculous. And you know what? I'm just going to draw the line right here. But I will in fact be back soon enough with one final addition to this little series in Honest J Nowak entirely. So stick around for that. And by the end of the day, you'll pretty much get to see it. But until then, if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.